What's up, everybody? Derek Johnson here, also known as Rattletrap 1776. So, the most recent thing that just takes the cake, the ice, and everything, man, is the federalization of the National Guard into D.C. So you have Ohio, West Virginia, and South Carolina states going into D.C. So if you can believe in that federalization, then you must believe in all federalizations. All right. So the biggest catch is, obviously, for a lot of people, is because you see President Trump visually, right, in office right now. To the average person, they see that. But military laws, military orders as prescribed on paper, and also federal laws as prescribed on paper, have not been followed the last 50, 60, 70 years, however far you want to go back. You can go back as far as you want to go. But especially after World War II, when everything kind of slid off track, with the amendment of the War Powers Act of 41-42 in 1973, and how a president can only declare a national emergency to use the National Guard, or military period for that matter. So it was the limitation of powers, but it backfired on them. See, everything right now is backfiring on all the Democrats and liberals and their little games they were playing. So you just take all their literature and you reverse it on them. So it's not a psyop, it's a counter psyop. But it's, straight up military operation, military occupation, continuity of government, using unconventional warfare, irregular warfare, which will be your clandestine and covert operations. So they're secretive until we want you to know that they've been used. But this is all public laws and orders as well, though. Everything I talk about, it's all public. You go look on a .gov or .mil site. But the most recent is the federalization into D.C. And then you have, quote-unquote, Gavin Newsom, who basically all he does is confirm, validate not only the operation, but also my number one best-selling books, The Midnight Rider Rides Again, Part 1, Part 2. And it's not about that, but it is from another angle, because they're the only books that outline the 45-47 military operation, military occupation, continuity of government, what the whole world's been watching and didn't realize what they've been watching. So let's just run over his quotes. Gavin said specifically that President Trump's a wartime president, so there's your one validation. He also said, "Do you not see what's taking place? This is going to be in every city soon. The National Guard are going to be in every city." So that's optics and comms, because you've already seen National Guard if you've been paying attention. And especially all of my fellow veterans out here, you already know. We already know. All right, so there's that. And then he turns and says another thing that's the key. Now, I've already proven everything. I have so many validation points that I don't need anymore. But this one right here takes the cake. When he said specifically that the National Guard are going to be at the election polls. They've already been there. I mean, so the next election will be this November, right? And then the next presidential election, is on out there from where we sit right now. So it's quite humorous, right, to go sit there and go, wow, all the last 3 years, all the people who can know, could have known, should have known, he just validated what I've been saying this whole time. And it's not about me, again. But when people say, why aren't more veterans stepping up? Why aren't more veterans saying this? Why don't you have more support from veterans out there? Hey, I can't control what isn't and who doesn't. All you can control is who is and who's telling it. And then you go research that. So let's just look at the election polls. So 2018, 2020, 2022, and 2024, the National Guard have been at the polls. All right. Well, there's an order in place for that. There's no Title 10 order in place for that, but there's a Title 32 on the books from Mattis in 2018. So who was the president in 2018? So if the National Guard were at the polls in 2018 and 2020 with a 2018 Title 32 order, still federal, then where's the Title 32 order for 2022 and 2024? There's not one there. So as that sits, it could, to the average person, look like the days of old, where they continued executive orders and they continued certain orders, right? They just passed it to a new president, not President Trump. The whole thing was to look different from 2016 in the past. That's why he was an outsider. He couldn't be bought. He hasn't been bought. He hasn't been compromised, none of that. The laws and orders show this. So as it sits, it would look to anybody who knows laws and orders and how laws and orders work, it would look as if Joe was cohesive with President Trump. We also know that's not true because of the Biden laptop report and all the other things that's already been put in place, and also the Supreme Court dockets and everything that President Trump's been winning with all the quote-unquote lawfare, right? So why isn't there a Title 32 order in place there? And we know for a fact the National Guard have been at the polls because NationalGuard.mil reports this and other mainstream outlets have reported this. So what would the National Guard be at the polls for? Well, they collect what? The forensics, the actual numbers, because we operate with analog, not digital. So we can get real-time, live-time, actual number count of who is and who isn't voting correctly, how many votes came through, etc. All right. And then also, you can't be at the polls if you're in your uniform, whether it's a single man, two man, however many, it doesn't matter. You cannot be at the polls. That is a Title 18 federal law. You can go look that up. And it says specifically in that clause of Title 18, Section 592, when you go look that up, it specifically tells you that the troops have to be there federal, so it's presidential, and then they're to do what? To repel the armed enemies of the United States. I mean, that's some very, very strong language there, to repel the armed enemies of the United States. And so we know for a fact the National Guard have been there 2018, 2020, 2022, 2024. It also ties into President Trump's Executive Order 13848 with the national emergency from September the 12th, 2018, which is for election interference. That quote-unquote Joe continued 4 years in a row. Just to pass back to President Trump on January the 20th, 2025. So Joe would damn his whole administration on his own if he was real? That's what that's saying. And then also, he never revoked or rescinded the Title 32 order. And we know for a fact the troops were at the polls in 2022 and 2024. So see, that's why you got to know laws and orders. Title 50, Chapter 33, Section 1550. That 1550 clause tells you everything, and every order after that clause put there December the 20th, 2019 is under that. And that's your War Powers Act. And it also tells you that that's not an amendment to the whole War Powers Act. It's a temporary placement from the NDAA of 2020, which means it's a strategic operation. It's budgeted by the Department of Defense, all right, and budgeted through the Congress. So guess what else? It was a Democrat-controlled House of Representatives under President Trump when that was passed. So it tells you it's bipartisan. So stop worrying about who isn't saying anything and start focusing on who is. And then go start studying what we know and how we know it. All right, that's the key thing right there. Also, my official pages. Be careful who you follow. All right, I'm saying this in every video now because there's just so many frauds and fakes out there. And if you don't see this message here, me telling you my official links, then you're on the wrong page. And the wrong pages won't see this because the fake pages don't put up anything when I say my official pages. My official pages, Linktree, linktr.ee/1776nation, pulls up all my accounts. I have a blue check on Facebook and Instagram. That's on Derek Johnson Country. So at Derek Johnson Country. And then also on Twitter, old school Twitter, new X, it's Rattletrap1776, blue check there. And on True Social, I have a red check. It's at Derek Johnson. All right, so go over to my official pages and find where I validate my official accounts. And what isn't my official account, if you'll please report them because they're frauds and scams and they're trying to make money off of people fraudulently. So check out my #1 best-selling books, The Midnight Rider Rides Again. #1, they explain 45-47 military operation.